On November 8th, the U.S. presidential election, which will be a historic and remarkable moment for the U.S., finally took place, and the entire world has paid its attention to the result. Republican presidential candidate Donald Trump dramatically turned the tide of the election in his favor and became the winner of the election. On today's Upfront, we discuss the expected impact of Trump's victory, who has been recognized as a political outsider, on the dynamics of the Korean Peninsula in the near future. For today's discussion, we're joined by experts on economy. First, we're joined by Kim Tae-hyun, Professor of International Relations at Chung-Ang University. And we have Seo Jung-kun, Professor of Political Science at Kyung Hee University. Welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me. Good to be back.
Now, let's start with Professor Kim. Are you surprised as many other people at the result? You've seen the presidential election this time around. Did you expect this kind of result?
I received an email from Washington Post, which confirmed earlier email report from New York Times that the probability that Hillary Clinton would win was 84%. And I shared that one, and I looked at state by state poll results, and I shared the prediction that Hillary Clinton will win 275 at the least electoral votes, college votes. So when I saw that the opposite, I was really surprised.
Professor Kim mentioned media outlets in the U.S. has been pretty one-sided in their broadcasts in many sectors. How did you assess that situation, and does that contribute to the result?
Well, at this point of time, I have to say that I was very, very surprised by the results, and there's no doubt about it. But if you go back and think about what the main reasons were, it was not only the Trump presidency and the U.S. economy kind of situation, but it's because the media, the mainstream media, such as the New York Times, Washington Post, have all kind of together attacked Donald Trump candidacy. And I think there seems to be some kind of consensus amongst some white working class voters that the mainstream news media is also very liberal. They are also one-siding with Hillary Clinton. So whatever the news media is delivering to us doesn't resonate with us. That might be their reaction. So, as you know, the Washington Post has tried to collect as much as kind of sort of evidence of why Donald Trump should not be the president. And whenever they are kind of delivering that information to the American public were not necessarily buying that information as they are. So the one kind of culprit, if you will, of this Hillary Clinton defeat in this election might be the news media. So the news media seems to be a part of the institution, part of the establishment in American politics already. So American voters have not only rejected the establishment in the name of Hillary Clinton, but also rejected the news media as a part of the establishment as well.
Yeah, I think there's an interesting dynamics going on with how Trump has been portrayed in the media, and how Trump supporters have taken the news and kind of turned it around.
Right.
I mean, but it's not just the news media outlets reporting, but this election campaign itself has been pretty controversial in the sense that there has been a lot of mudslinging. A lot of people commented that the both candidates are not in their favor, so it was the picking of the lesser evil, so to speak, and a lot of people kind of mentioned that they were very shameful of the candidates themselves. So this kind of sentiment seemed to be kind of prevalent throughout the campaign, but through it all, what worked for what worked for Trump, and what did not work for Hillary Clinton?
Yeah, I would say that this election was in favor of the Republican Party from the beginning, because it's a Democratic Party who has been ruling the country for 8 years already. So it was a turn for the Republicans. The Republicans must be more motivated than the Democrats to have their own administration, and so that is one factor. So unless they had Donald Trump as a nominee, Republican Party would have won easily, maybe. Then Donald Trump came in, and so then he appealed to some kind of unsung voices and unheard stories. That is, on the one hand, while there are some mainstream people may have wanted a change from Democratic Party to Republican Party, that is one change. Another one, they want changes for entire establishment, as just Professor just mentioned. That is, the reality, socio-economic reality during past decade has so profound, while the established political circle was not reflecting that one into the policies as well as politics. That was deeply disenchanted those kind of people, particularly those blue-collar workers in what is called Rust Belt, who think because of Mr. Trump, that they were losing their jobs because of competition from China, illegal practices, all those kind of things. So that was all reflected in the anti-establishment one thing and let's say, Democrats from the Republican side is combined, pushed Trump to become president, although he was such kind of erratic candidate in personal appearances. So some people say that having such kind of demand for change is not surprising at this moment. It's more surprising is that it's this late. It should have happened 4 years ago or 8 years before, they say. So that was kind of deep uproar for changes in American society has been there already, I think.
Well, we have advantage of hindsight a little bit, but let me have a little bit of a pushback on that. I mean, isn't there an argument that some people might say that, well, if it's working, why fix it, right? The approval rating for Obama was pretty high going in, and he was considered as an asset in terms of campaigning for his party. And the old maxim of "its economy is stupid," the economy was, at least on the paper, was doing well. Unemployment rate was down, and the projection was that because of the good mood in economy and approval ratings on Obama, the Clinton would be helped by those kind of good environment. It turned out not to be the case.
That's right. It's we have to be careful in terms of interpreting how the economy was going at the time of the Obama administration. Of course, there is no doubt that the Obama presidency has helped the U.S. economy come back to the normalcy, but it's not necessarily reflecting the kind of high job growth or high kind of economic boom or something like that. So at the same time, the economy was recovering from the 2008 financial crisis, but at the same time, the middle class has collapsed. There is no doubt about it. The Wall Street has taken a huge portion of the economy, and top 10%, top 1% of the income bracket are earning kind of almost 40% of the national income. So the middle class is kind of collapsing, and the white working class have no party to resort to in terms of voicing their concerns, in terms of saying we have these problems, we have these complaints. So the Republican Party, especially the mainstream Republican Party, represented by Paul Ryan, the Speaker of the House, was not necessarily delivering the real voices of the Republican voters. And they have finally found Donald Trump as a candidate, as someone who can speak very easy words, who can express their own concerns by talking about the immigration is a problem. Latinos should be deported. We have to fix this economy, and China is a problem. So many easy expressions, many easy campaign slogans have been very effective for Donald Trump camp to sway Republican voters into their own column. So the economic indicators might be one thing, but economic kind of reality, economic inequality might be the other. So that is the kind of the latter is the main reason why a lot of Republican voters were driven to vote for Donald Trump this time.
I see. But can't you say that it's kind of a populism ploy, that people are dissatisfied and they're angry, and you deliver the message that cater to their emotional side, you get the vote. But that might not be the best course of action. After the Brexit vote, a lot of people say that they regretted their vote. I don't know whether there would be translated into future votes. But do you think this is kind of a thing that's happening in the same way in the United States, where Donald Trump is catering to the emotions and the angers of the people? Or do you think that there's a substantive message that is delivering that is workable?
I guess both are true. And Donald Trump was taking good care of people's and voters' kind of anxieties and kind of crisis mood. And people have found Donald Trump as their standard bearer in terms of how to fix the economy. And that's a kind of perfect matchup. And I also have to mention that one bigger picture here is America, as we know, is the kind of America conveyed by the mainstream media. America conveyed by kind of top scholars who are teaching at Harvard. So we kind of, this sounds like a kind of Monday night quarterbacking, but we, especially me, I have not talked to someone who has not been able to pay their phone bills, their mortgages, because those people are not necessarily covered by the news media as we see. And so the economic inequality, economic problems are kind of sort of evidenced in the numbers and indicators, but maybe we have not felt, we meaning foreign outsiders, foreign observers, have not necessarily felt the real pains, the real kind of hard time amongst those, the so-called white working class people who have deserted the old Republican Party to absorb the new standard bearer, Donald Trump. So the chasm between the mainstream Republican establishment and the Republican old-style voters has been so huge. But we, as foreign observers, have just watched the CNN, have watched the New York Times, listened to the New York Times, and that was it. The sources have been very limited in terms of better understanding what's really going on in the United States. So now this election results vindicate that there's something very serious have been going in American economy and American society.
So it's a wake-up call.
Yes, I think so,
I think
really.
it's corroborated by the fact that the Rust Belt, as you mentioned, the Wisconsin, Michigan, there were traditionally manufacturing sector was strong, but it was hard hit by the economic situations in recent years. Those are the states that kind of decided the outcome of the Trump victory.
Right. I mean, as I said, that those mainstream media had wishful thinking. That is, that your typical swing states, Ohio, Florida, and North Carolina, which is in between. And then they calculated and conceded that given Ohio is gone to Trump, Florida is gone to Trump, North Carolina is gone to Trump, but still Hillary Clinton will win the 275 to 263. It was prediction by both New York Times and Washington Post. And joking, or let's say, New York Times say, in order for Donald Trump to win, he would have to take either Michigan, Wisconsin, and Minnesota, any of them. And the question is, how? But they all got it, right? He all got all of them, Pennsylvania and Wisconsin and Michigan. That was typical Rust Belt area. So all the while they were emphasizing the impact of Rust Belt area and those blue-collar white people who are angered and who are frustrated by those foreign companies. But still, they didn't see them in this Rust Belt area. So that was kind of surprising in hindsight, of course.
So that's when I was watching Donald Trump visiting the state of Michigan 2 days prior to the election, I felt, oh my goodness, there was something going on here, because otherwise he was just wasting his time at the very critical juncture. So if when he was visiting the state of Michigan and Minnesota as well, when everybody was thinking that, oh, Michigan was off the table already, then there was something going on in the final weeks of the elections. And I was also very surprised by the result in the state of Pennsylvania. And now I'm teaching American politics at school, and I taught my students that, hey, students, if the Hillary Clinton is losing the state of Pennsylvania, then that must be it.
Right.
So the Pennsylvania has been carried by the Democratic Party since 1988. The kind of the Republican Party's kind of dream state has been the state of Pennsylvania. Because if you look at the Pennsylvania structure, the right side, Philadelphia, left side, Pittsburgh, and the inside of Pennsylvania, the nickname was Alabama. It's a very conservative area in the state of Pennsylvania. Even though that was the case, the Republican Party has failed to carry the state of Pennsylvania ever since 1988. But this time, Pennsylvania has been carried by Donald Trump and the Republican Party. And that is a huge sign. And that might be having to do with the possibility that we have to check the numbers, but the black turnout in the cities like Pittsburgh and Philadelphia might be not necessarily as high as Hillary campaign had expected.
Right.
So the black turnout might be the problem, and the conservative white working class voters were kind of very enthusiastic about Donald Trump's new directions and new kind of policies. So, and one more thing is the one very important element which was holding the Republican Party as one party was the patriotism. But ever since the failure of the Iraq War by the Bush administration in 2003, 2005, now the so-called issue ownership, the national security gap between the two parties has dwindled a great deal. So now the Republican voters have no big reason to support the Republican Party anymore, because the Republican Party was the failed party in terms of foreign policies. So that is another reason why now the Republican voters have their own voices in terms of protectionism and anti-immigration and anti kind of social policies. So this whole new picture painted by Donald Trump is something that might be sort of lasting for at least some period of time in American politics.
I see. I think a lot of people will be making connections with, as you said, hindsight is always 2020.
Right.
But the failure of the Wall Street, the financial crisis, and what's happening in Europe, including the Brexit, I think a lot of people will be making that connections, that it's not just the American working class, but it's happening all over the place. Now, domestic situations aside, as Korean viewers probably, we have to own up to the fact that there will be change in terms of foreign policies. And I think that the overall assessment would be, the one thing to start, how do you see the Korea-U.S. relationship changing? Do you foresee a dramatic change, or do you think that there will be a gradual shift?
Well, if we take the words by Mr. Trump as they are, then you may expect a drastic change. But two things will moderate that kind of drastic changes. One, what he said as a candidate is one thing, and what he will do as a president is another thing. Once he is in, he will see the different pictures. He will be constrained by international balance of power thing and domestic institutional establishment, all those kind of things. The other one is anyway, it's a bilateral thing. I mean, this is a negotiable thing. But still, if we have been, let's say, settled with the realities as a stability or robustness of U.S.-Korea alliance is something, then we would be surprised. We would expect a lot of changes. Just from what He said, as well as his general outlook, he is not such an expert in international affairs. He does not value very much of international standing of the United States and commitment and so on. So, yes, I would expect more changes than we hope, I guess.
I see.
So now the hard part comes in now. The kind of the populism Donald Trump has relied so much on for his winning the White House is something that is not necessarily translated easily to public policy. So public mood is one thing, and public policy is quite the other. So if you think about the real policy changes, policy proposals, maybe I thought that Donald Trump got some advice from his own experts or someone. Like, if you think about the Korea-U.S. free trade agreements, when the U.S. House and the U.S. Senate passed the KORUS, the Korea-U.S. free trade agreements and implementing bills back in 2011, it has become the U.S. law.
Right.
The president is not in a position of repealing the law on his own. So that's why Donald Trump seemed to have been talking about, oh, let's renegotiate. But it's a kind of, it's not sort of one-way kind of sort of action, renegotiating with us, so that we have kind of, we now can say what we really want and what we can do as well. So one more thing is that I think to some extent, this is a good opportunity for us, Korea. Maybe sounds kind of weird, but if Hillary Clinton had been elected to the White House, then the kind of traditional U.S. foreign policy will be just conducted as well. And a pivot to Pacific, China containment, and kind of alliance politics, et cetera. But American voters have spoken out for their own interest. And now it's time for us to think about what we really want, and now what we can say could be a sort of our own new foreign policy. Now, this is what we really want in terms of how to deal with North Korea, how to deal with kind of economic problems in the United States and Korea. So this might be the kind of, ironically speaking, this might be the good time and good chance for us to kind of reposition Korean foreign policy, Korean political proposals in a kind of new fashion. So this is new whole world, a new whole game getting started.
Yeah, I'll have to probe on the optimistic view some more. But let's stay on the economic side. As we saw the Trump kind of having his resurgence during these elections, we saw that a lot of the stock markets are nervously reacting. KOSPI was down, and KOSDAQ was also down. Now, granted that these financial markets usually don't like uncertainties. So Trump becoming a president is an uncertainty. And it doesn't say that it is in a good way or a bad way, but I guess Wall Street probably has some reasons to be nervous about. But are we prepared? Are we as well prepared for this kind of changes, or do you think the Korean preparedness has been less than desired?
You know, we have gone through that kind of shocks. I mean, our financial market is so open to the global world market. So wherever there are shocks, and we are affected. We have been affected. Because of that, and I think our system has become more robust to handle that kind of shocks. So I think, to that extent, we are ready. But, well, just as you mentioned, the shock to the fashion market is just because of the fear of uncertainty rather than substantive contents. I didn't see any kind of substantive threatening comment from Mr. Trump about the financial stability so far yet, although he mentioned about renegotiation of Trump and so on. So it may affect, but over the long run, I think financial market will stabilize, and I mean, I think our market is resilient to meet the kind of disturbances already.
But to an extent, the predictability will return as he makes kind of certain, or make it more plain to see what his policies is. But isn't it also true that he, and as well as Hillary Clinton, has been pretty big on this notion of protectionism. In terms of trade, it's a little bit of a shift from American policy's point of view. On that point, Korea is pretty nervous because we rely on trade a lot and our export-oriented economies that has been the engine of growth. Should we be very nervous about that?
Well, two things. One is one thing noticeable in terms of this election results is that the Rust Belt has spoken loud. I thought that if Hillary Clinton could keep the state of Pennsylvania, Michigan, Ohio, Wisconsin in the blue column, even though then if Donald Trump would win the state of Ohio, Florida, Iowa, North Carolina, I thought that Hillary could have won the presidency. But it's not the case, as we can see from the results. Pennsylvania gone red, Michigan gone red, Wisconsin gone red. So those Rust Belt kind of area, white working class people, people hard hit by the free trade, this is kind of a very strong message that can be delivered to the 115th Congress that will convene on January the 3rd of 2017. So the U.S. Congress, I thought that previously, if Donald Trump, even though Donald Trump was winning the presidency, U.S. Congress could be a kind of checking point for any kind of Donald Trump's sort of unexpected and unpredictable policy making. But this time, the Rust Belt kind of message was so strong that the United States Congress would not be necessarily resist the voices and concerns of the white working class anymore. And the other is that
so Senate has the Republican majority and the House has the Republican majority.
Exactly.
And President alone. So at this point, it's a Republican
Republican
world.
House, Republican Senate, Republican presidency.
Right.
It's called a unified government, right? But at the same time, like you said, the public mood could not be necessarily translated into public policy. So if Donald Trump is kind of pressing China to sort of appreciate Chinese currency or something like that, that might be provoking sort of China kind of trade war with China. Then one thing we can see in the near future is the bad impacts upon the consumers in those Rust Belt as well. Because if you are pressing China into the kind of trade war type of situation, then the sneakers, for example, you can buy in the Walmart for only $5 could be going high to $8.
Right.
And who are buying those sneakers? White working class people. The short-term policy effects could be felt amongst the poor white working class people first. If you're rich, if you're working for Wall Street, then the kind of impact and effects might be not necessarily felt immediately. So if that kind of policy consequences, kind of unexpected policy consequences are kind of occurring, then white working class voters and others might be sort of getting disillusioned about kind of the difficulty of kind of populism turned policy making in this globalized world and globalized America. So we have to wait and see what kind of policies Donald Trump presidency are kind of proposing and what kind of responses those white working class voters who have supported Donald Trump are going to show.
I see. I think that the consumers' reaction would be kind of what we have to see going forward. Although Donald Trump has a strong point in the working class white Americans, but the matter of the fact that is that he did well across the board this time around. Even among the Latinos, even among the women, actually, he didn't win over it, but he didn't lose that badly. So it seems like there is a kind of a concerted voice, as you said, to push for more policies away from the establishments, maybe away from the kind of courses that the U.S. Has taken so far.
I have all the, when I talk to more political economists, So when I was expressing my worries that if, say, what we have experienced in the 1930s, that is, the economy was going downturn, so each country had turned to protectionist policies, which created chain reactions, then the world became worse and worse, then nations began to point fingers to each other, leading to the Second World War. That was worst case scenario. And someone who is more familiar with the economics, they say, hey, you are writing a novel, he said. The world economy is so much integrated in reality and also integrated as institutions. So there are not much things that you, even if Donald Trump get into a more populist platform, but there is a little room that he can turn that one into the policies that you mentioned that FTA is already a law, and how can he change? And he was saying that after experiencing the financial shock of 2008, the G20 has become a summit level, and progressively G20 summits have worked very hard to lay down some kind of incremental changes for the smooth transition of financial systems in the world market to meet new changes. So then the election of Donald Trump or the Brexit, that surprises will precipitate such changes, but don't be surprised by any kind of radical changes. He was his advice, so I'm dwelling on his advice, in fact.
I see. Would that sentiment be the same on the security side? I mean, we heard a lot about Donald Trump pointing out, actually singling out Korea situation. They're saying that we have to share the cost of the protection and the security in this region, and so on and so forth. It's not just us. Japan probably is in the same situation. Do you think that there will be a dramatic change on that front?
Well, I mean, as you mentioned, the U.S. troops are now stationed in different countries like South Korea, Germany, Saudi Arabia, and Japan. So if Donald Trump is really wanting to renegotiate the cost burdening with those four countries, that might be very complicated procedure as well, right? So which country is going to pay more and how much, by when? So in reality, that's not an easy solution there. And at the same time, the reason why Donald Trump got elected into the White House this time is mainly because of the immigration issue, mainly because of domestic problems. So I don't think Donald Trump presidency will bring up Korean Peninsula issues or North Korea issues within the first year of his own presidency. And on top of that, North Korea situation is like, there's no real options. There are not real kind of easy shortcut answers to that situation. So that's why Donald Trump has been saying that, oh, we have to press China to follow U.S. foreign policy toward North Korea. But as we all know, China has its own calculations. China has its own strategies. So there is no guarantee that China will follow up on Donald Trump's advice or kind of policy proposals. So that area of international politics is not the one where Donald Trump is making any real and quick progress. And Donald Trump is now facing next 2 years before he hits the time of midterm elections. And American people are kind of not necessarily patient with Donald Trump. They are not going to wait for Donald Trump to make any accomplishments within those 2 years. So they they want to be kind of very anxious. They want to be seeing Donald Trump making real changes. But what the president in the United States can do is very different from what the president can be expected to do. So that's what we call the expectation gap. So that expectation gap is going to play out very hard against President Donald Trump in 2 years. So Donald Trump should be kind of quick and kind of trying very hard to make some real progresses, and those real progresses can be made not necessarily in the realm of international relations, but in the area of domestic politics, such as undocumented the immigrants and tax cuts and the protection of the Second Amendment and stuff like that.
That is a very interesting question. Traditionally, the U.S. president has more power in the foreign policy areas rather than the domestic and also economic issues. And as Professor Suh mentioned, the regional security in Asia and the foreign policy cannot be discussed without invoking what U.S. will do with China.
Right.
Do you think the China relation will kind of change from the way the Obama administration has approached, and what would that mean to the North Korea-U.S. relations?
Well,
or lack of relations?
Kind of, to me personally, it's a kind of a surprise or disappointment that during the Obama administration, U.S.-China relations was not very good. I mean, somehow Obama administration proposed a rebalancing strategy. From my reading, it is not necessarily containment of China, it is more like a hedging, but it led to China read it as an attempt to China. So it is escalate into some kind of bitter exchanges, and that come into reality in Korean Peninsula, that when the United States tried to deploy THAAD missiles, the anti-system, then China read it as a kind of an attempt to contain China rather than defend against North Korean missiles. That was kind of a thing. So it was kind of disappointment as well as surprise to me. And I was expecting that if Hillary Clinton becomes the president, that kind of pattern may continue. So that means the U.S.-China rivalry will get exacerbated over the time, and that putting Korea into more dilemma over the choices between to fight whale or something like that. I hope that Donald Trump, he always say that because he is a businessman, he is very good at negotiation and bargaining. He strikes a deal with China to make a more manageable international atmosphere and environment here, although not at the expense of smaller powers. One thing that he said he will let China solve that issue is one kind of a thing. Criticizing China as causing economic troubles for China, but U.S. is another thing. But anyway, so I mean, what worries me, in fact, is that he doesn't seem to be very well prepared for his North Korean policies, how to resolve North Korean nuclear challenges. I mean, nobody can be because he's so advanced. Given that, so it will take time for him to build up his foreign policy team and let them review the policy situation, come up with the policy proposals. It's going to take time. Well, in that transition period, what if North Korea do some kind of thing that we have not expected before? What if they caught the new administration of the United States by surprises? That is kind of a worry that I'm thinking of. So in that regard, as Professor Suh already mentioned, that the election of new president may create some kind of new landscape for Korea for different maneuvers. So I mean, we who has more stakes in inter-Korean relations, North Korea's behavior, should open our eyes very wide open and see all the potentials and check out all the possible options, and then prepared to go through when some contingencies happen.
Right. There is certainly that uncertainty over and above what he said during the campaign, and also probably the North Korea will test the water in one way or the other. We've discussed the result of the U.S. presidential election so far, and from now on, let's take an in-depth look at the campaign rallies of the two candidates, along with the variety of issues that arose during the election period.
About a week ahead of the long-awaited U.S. presidential election, two candidates are employing the last-ditch efforts to attract more voters. And Republican presidential candidate Donald Trump has tried to turn the tables on Clinton by sweeping the 5 U.S. states despite withdrawing support from the Republicans. Along with her campaign trail with a huge number of supporters, Democratic presidential candidate Hillary Clinton has received heavy support from African Americans and female voters. The electors are scheduled to formally cast their electoral votes in mid-December, but the two candidates have focused more on the election that will take place on November 8th, which voters will select the presidential electors. As the U.S. president is an indirect election, the candidate who wins more electoral college votes can become the next president of the United States. The final result of the U.S. presidential election is not decided by the total number of the popular votes. The candidate might lose the election when getting less electoral votes. It's almost been a year since the two candidates have been locked in a tight race to become the 45th president of the United States. Between February and June, voters from each state selected a slate of delegates to a political party's nominating convention, who then in turn elected their party's presidential nominee. And in July, political parties held party conventions and selected their presidential nominees. And the nominated candidates dived into their election campaigns. Voters can have chances to evaluate the two presidential candidates through 3 presidential TV debates, which took place from September to October. During the presidential debates, the two candidates amplified personal attacks on each other, rather than mentioning their different policy proposals. Controversial scandals of both Clinton and Trump have affected the approval ratings of the two candidates, even the day before the election. Hillary Clinton took the lead over Donald Trump within the margin of error, so no one knew beforehand how things will turn out. On December 19th, the Electoral College voters will meet in their respective state capitals and vote for the U.S. president.
Professor Seo, the Donald Trump is a president-elect at this point. Before he swears in sometime in January, there are some procedures that the U.S. The political process goes through. Could you tell us what they will be doing during that time?
Well, technically, American voters have cast their ballots on the presidential candidates, but in reality, what they have chosen on November the 8th is not the presidents themselves, but the electors. Electors would gather in Washington, D.C. on the 19th of December, and they cast their ballots one more time. And those votes are kind of vindicated by the new Congress, which is gathering on January the 3rd, but on January the 6th, they are kind of recounting everything to vindicate that this is real and genuine. And that is now kind of formality because there's now kind of a vote gap, a vote margin between Hillary and Donald Trump.
Right.
And now Donald Trump is the president-elect. And if you think about one interesting history, is that after winning the election in 1952, Dwight Eisenhower visited Korea as the president-elect.
I see.
Because at a couple of weeks prior to the election, he mentioned that I shall go to Korea to end the Korean War back then. So now the president-elect, the Trump, is making a transition team and kind of protected by secret services, et cetera, et cetera. And the kind of term between the outgoing president and the incoming president is shortened after the experience of Herbert Hoover and Franklin Roosevelt in 1933. Almost almost 4 months of vacuum. Because back then, the first Tuesday after first Monday, November, the election day, but back then the inauguration day was March the 4th.
I see, instead of January.
Instead of January. So now they got the constitutional amendment, which is saying that now the new president is going to swear in on the January 20th of next year. So now Donald Trump will behave as the new president, of course, and President Barack Obama has to talk to Donald Trump to talk. The tradition is the outgoing president is inviting the new president into the White House to have him look around the facilities and rooms, et cetera, et cetera. So now the picture we can imagine is Barack Obama and Donald Trump standing together, patting on the back together. And it's kind of a new development we have not necessarily imagined to happen.
Yeah, several months of transition period is ahead. And during that period, probably some of the issues that we talked about, security issues of foreign policies, probably he'll, as a president-elect, will revisit those issues. Do you have any advices for us, government, how to approach the transition period and also the Trump presidency?
From our Korean government, you're
from
saying?
Korean government's point of view.
I think our government was as caught by surprise as much as everybody else, mainstream news media and all of us. So, I mean, also, so far, some people are worrying that Korea government has been betting too much on the victory of Clinton, neglecting Donald Trump. So, so somehow we have to build up our team and approaches to Donald Trump, transition teams and his advisors. We better get with the briefings and documents, better get more knowledge about Korean Peninsula. And also, I hope that Obama president, because those Korean issues are really ongoing issues, that will give up some kind of briefings and debriefing to the next president-elect before they really come into presidency. And so why not a surprise visit to, if not to Seoul, to Pyongyang?
I see. Okay, the same question. Probably Korean government has a long list of issues that they want to visit, not only because of the security issues, but there are trade issues that has been talked about during the campaign. And also, I think that there is a domestic issues that's related to the social issues that the Korea might be facing. So if you can address those issues.
Well, I would say that definitely the US elections are over. So maybe a lot of people might be thinking about, who is close to Trump, what we should do in terms of responding to Donald Trump's request or stuff like that. I don't think that's the right way to address the US-Korea relationship. I have been arguing that we should know what we want first. We need internal talks, we need more debates about how to deal with North Korea. I've been saying that the United States government has kind of not a fixed idea about their own goals in terms of dealing with North Korea. It could be three options. One is denuclearization. The second is a nuclear freeze. The third is a non-proliferation. Those three different policy goals might be producing different sets and dimensions of domestic politics in the United States. So we should not be necessarily swayed by US own decisions. We should know what we want to do first in terms of how to deal with North Korea, what our position should be, what our strategy should be, stuff like that. And one more thing is, I would say Donald Trump presidency is very vulnerable. He is a president driven by populism. Like I said, populism turned presidency might have a hard time making those populism formed into public policy. So populism has put Donald Trump at the White House, but that populism might be pulling him away from the White House in 2 years or 4 years. So we don't necessarily have to be, who is close, what we should do. We don't have to be nervous. We should be kind of sitting down and sit down and calm and think about what we should do. I mean, as we Korea, it's not just how to respond, what they want. No, it's not what we have to think about at this point of time. The election is over. We have to think about our own policies and our own interest. I think that's the first.
I see. The last question I would have is a connection between what would happen in the United States and Korea. For example, the Supreme Court justices, there are the one vacancy at this point, but there might be some others in the Donald Trump presidency. So there would be a kind of shift towards more conservatism, and that might jive well with protectionism and also the kind of policies that he has talked about. Do you think that that kind of change will affect Korea in terms of how we kind of deal with the U.S. policies going forward?
Well, I mean, the small changes as far as the United States is such a strong power and have influences around the world, whatever changes they have, may have influence in Korea as well. But as just Professor Tom mentions, I mean, we are such a resilient nation already, so we don't have to worry too much about the kind of changes. I mean, I think that Donald Trump already listed the candidate for the Supreme Court judges vacancies. So we have some kind of expectations already built up. So yeah, I mean, it may affect, but don't be nervous.
I see. That kind of preparedness probably is required for governments, and you as an expert has provided some guidance, but still there are a lot of uncertainties abound.
We have to think very hard. Yes, what's going to happen and how we can respond to that kind of changes. Yeah.
Right. Going forward, probably we'll have to look very closely as to what happens in the U.S. domestically and their policy changes overseas in terms of the economy and the foreign policy. Thank you for your contribution today.
Thank you.
New president in the U.S. means a new face in the White House and new policies from a new team. Donald Trump's win signals a potentially sweeping changes in foreign, economic, and security policies. Will Donald Trump be able to close the wound laid bare during the campaign and fill the traditional role of the leader of the free countries? The world's eyes are on him. Thank you for watching. I'll see you next time.